my identity in the Wurundjeri community was something, and I'll be straight out. It wasn't a positive for me growing up as a young Aboriginal person. First of all, I didn't even know I was Wurundjeri. I remember in grade 5 that I had to do a report on Victorian history, and it was based on a fellow named John Batman, and John Batman meeting the Aborigines. And I didn't even know at that time that the Aborigines were my relatives. And but when I got to learn who I was, my family history, my cultural connection, the Wurundjeri story, the pride in my identity became very strong. And now I run a lot of the education services at Wurundjeri, telling the Wurundjeri perspective of country and what I call Wurundjeri story, our culture, our history, and our modern community today. So for any Aboriginal person, if you don't know your identity concerning your connection to what landscape your family's from, and what tribal group, what language group, and your family connection, it's very hard to be a proud person in today's society without that identity. Like any Wurundjeri story, it's very hard to just pinpoint an area, but Manningham is involved in this story. So, look, I'm going to cut a very long story short, but basically in 1835, a man named John Batman came here to acquire land off my ancestors. A man named Billabong was the head man of this area, Wurundjeri Nuttingeeter or tribal spokesman person, the father of Simon Wonga, where Wonga Park gets its name. And as we were pushed further and further to the fringes of white man society, we had to make a bit of a stance, because back in those days, you didn't have convenience of supermarkets and service stations. If you didn't have land or access to water, you would not survive. We were not able to live traditionally anymore by following the seasonal rotation of food resources. As the land was being acquired so quickly, we didn't have access to it. So Warrandyte actually became a rations depot, or some people call it a reservation, where Wonga and the very last few Wurundjeri people on this earth was a bit of a safe haven for them. Traditional land management was extraordinary. The major tool was fire. I suppose if you consider a farmer today, he'll plough his land, he'll fertilise his land, he'll water his land, he'll look after it by getting rid of the weeds and so forth. So in a Wurundjeri context, the ploughing of the land was done through women's digging sticks. So a lot of our traditional foods were tuberous plants. This is the staple foods, which are kind of like carrot and potato of today. So women would dig them up with their digging sticks, which would aerate and churn up the soil, very similar to how a plough does it. The fire practices themselves were done in a cool way. Fire is done at a specific time of year, and it's done in a specific way for a specific landscape. So grasses were the only things burnt. Fire was done in a cool manner, so you'd never put too much heat into the soil, because that's where your seed bank is. If you're burning too hot on country, you're burning your next generation of vegetation. You're killing your seed bank. The other thing too is, which was explained to me very well by an elder from up north, he said that we live on the ground, that's our habitat, we don't live up in the canopy, so we leave that alone. So part of traditional burning and the law behind it was you do not burn the trees and the canopy, because you're potentially destroying food resources and animal habitat resources. And it's actually against the law in Aboriginal culture to do that. So fire practices done right will help regenerate bush foods and medicines. And the old people knew, and this is the knowledge we're rebuilding today, what type of fire for what landscape will regenerate what type of food. So the moon would tell you when to move through the lunar cycle. That was our natural timekeeper. And when you moved from place to place, you knew exactly what food resource was available in that next place you were going to stay at. And we would never stay too long to exhaust a resource. We'd move on. So, and population, we never overpopulate an area. So the pressure on the resources never became so great. So when when the colony came here and started fencing things off and saying it was theirs, it started to break up that connection to country and the movement through country. Again, Wonga would have had sleepless nights, but he was a wise man, and he knew for his people's survival they had to adapt to the colonial way of living. And he petitioned the government for years for land. So that's why I call him our first land rights advocate. Simon Wonga passed away around a decade after it was settled, and Birrarung took over. Birrarung got fed up with the mistreatment. Quotes like, why are we being treated like criminals when we haven't done anything wrong? Why haven't we got the same equality as the white man? We haven't murdered anyone or stolen anyone's land. You can just see in what he said the frustrations of the man himself, but also he was conveying his people's frustration. Now, he walked from Melbourne to Hillsville over a dozen times to meet with the governors and premiers of this, what was now called Victoria. He became personal friends with them. He knew how to talk to them. He earned their respect. And the very first Royal Commission in Australia was due to the conditions and treatment at Corranderk after Birrarung's efforts. If you're travelling along a valley of a road that follows the contours of valleys, a road that will follow the rivers, or a major highway arterial, there's a very good chance you're on an Aboriginal trading route or songline. Because it's that human nature. If you want to go to point A to point B, you're not going to go the difficult way. You're going to go the best way. And in a traditional sense, you're going to follow the waterways in a lot of cases. You're not going to walk off into a country for days on end without water resources. So driving around Manningham, there is quite a number of roads that follow traditional songlines. I just like to explain it that, our culture is old and ancient, if not the oldest in the world. But the thing about culture and cultural practices means it continues, which means it's also modern. I just hope that the government and the community can get it right in this modern treaty discussion, because I think it's our last hope in creating self-sufficiency in our way. And getting our young fellas out of prison, stopping the high suicide rate, instilling pride into our young men and women so they can survive in this world as proud Aboriginal people and not being put down or even in their own mental health, in feeling like they're lesser than someone else because that's what they've been taught. So I just hope that's going to happen. If it doesn't, I have a bit of a worry for our future, actually. Will things change? Because things change very slowly. They change generationally sometimes. There's so many elders of the modern era that fought for certain things but did not survive to the end of the result. And because it takes so long to make things change. We don't want to take people's homes, businesses. We don't want to just destroy the education system. Just let it all happen. We just want the chance to create our own future in our own way. That's what we're asking for. I always consider if people want to learn more and find the values of country and incorporating culture, Aboriginal culture within their local areas, get it from us. Get it from the Wurundjeri people, the Wurundjeri elders, and skilled Wurundjeri artists and dancers and educators. So, I take tours around, areas of Manningham, like Bolin, Warrandyte, Pound Bend, just to give people a Wurundjeri perspective of those areas, which if you're a local person of those areas, you might know well. You might visit there, throughout your life, take your family there, whatever, but you probably wouldn't have got the Wurundjeri perspective of those areas without meeting a Wurundjeri person.